Something invisible is killing the Adventist faith right now. Entire families, marriages of decades, young people baptized in tears, all falling apart, all collapsing spiritually, and no one understands why. Pastors preach, parents pray, members faithfully attend every Sabbath. But something isn't working, something is broken. And the most terrifying thing is that Ellen White described exactly this, saw this collapse, warned about this moment, and left specific signs to identify what is destroying the faith from within. But almost no one talks about it. Almost no one connects what she wrote with what is happening right now before our eyes. Why do families that seemed solid suddenly wake up destroyed? Why do young people raised in Adventist homes declare themselves atheists? Why do couples who prayed together end up divorced? Why do active members lose all spiritual sensitivity without being able to explain what happened? There's a reason, a pattern, something White saw over 100 years ago that's happening exactly as she described it. But to understand it, you need to know something most people completely ignore. Something that will change how you see everything happening in the Adventist church right now. In her testimonies to the church, White warned of a shaking so intense it would test the authenticity of every profession of faith. A crisis where many who seemed steadfast would fall like leaves in autumn. But here's what almost no one notices. She didn't say they would fall because of external persecution. She didn't say the government would force them. She didn't say they would be tortured into resigning. She said something far more disturbing. She said they would fall because something internal was already broken, because something essential was missing. And when the test came, it would simply reveal what was already a reality: dead faith disguised as orthodoxy. Wait. This means that right now, there are people sitting in Adventist pews every Sabbath who are already spiritually dead. They have lost their true connection with God, following outward forms out of habit, but internally nothing is alive anymore. And the worst part is they don't know it. They think they're fine. They think that because they know the doctrines, they are safe. They think that because they attend church, they are protected. They don't understand that all of that can exist without real spiritual life. And White warned that when the final shaking comes, these will fall first. Those who seem the strongest, those who seem the most secure. How can you tell if you're in that group? There are signs. Ellen White described them. They aren't obvious. They aren't dramatic. They are subtle, silent, progressive. And by the time you consciously notice them, it's almost too late. The first sign is this: your day begins without God. Not occasionally, but consistently. You wake up and the first thing you do is check your phone messages, social media, the news. Your mind is immediately filled with secular information, material worries, unnecessary stress, and God doesn't appear in your first thoughts. He isn't your first priority. He isn't your first contact. Wait until after breakfast, until you're dressed, until everything else is done. And sometimes it doesn't even come. The day simply slips by without you having consciously spoken to it. Ellen White wrote constantly about family worship, about how the biblical patriarchs began each day by consecrating their homes to God. She considered this practice absolutely essential. A home without a family altar was, in her theology, a home without spiritual protection. Angels could not fully minister. The Holy Spirit could not work freely. The family was exposed to influences it could neither detect nor resist. It sounds extreme, perhaps, but look at the results. Adventist families without a family altar are collapsing. Their children are failing. Their marriages are ending. And they don't understand why. Ellen White would have said, the first pillar fell years ago and you didn't notice. What's going on? Think about this. If an Adventist family doesn't have daily worship together, what do they really have? Doctrinal knowledge, church attendance on Saturdays, perhaps Sabbath school, perhaps participation in activities, but not a conscious and intentional daily connection with God as a family. Not that moment where heaven touches earth where the word penetrates the heart, where the family kneels together acknowledging total dependence. Without that, what protection do they have against all that comes during the week? Schools teaching evolution, peers pressuring for conformity to the world, social media bombarding them with anti-Christian values, secular entertainment shaping worldviews, all of it battering minds that were never fortified through daily communion with God. And here's what Ellen White saw, which is absolutely terrifying. The first experiences of the day set the pattern for everything that follows. If you begin without God, you continue without God, even if you don't consciously notice it. Your mind becomes tuned to a secular frequency. Your thoughts naturally flow toward the material. Your reactions to problems are carnal, not spiritual. Your decisions are based on human logic, not divine guidance. And at the end of the day, you realize that God was absent from your consciousness practically the entire time. Not because he walked away, but because you never invited him in from the start. How do you fix this? Hold on, before you answer that, you need to understand something else, because the problem isn't just the family altar, there's something more. Another sign that faith is dying internally, even though externally everything seems fine. And this second sign is even more subtle than the first, even harder to detect. But White identified it with surgical precision. Observe a Sabbath honestly. Not what you profess about the Sabbath, but what you actually do during those 24 hours. Is it truly holy? Is it completely different from the other days? Or is it simply a day where you don't work secularly, but also don't do anything intensely spiritual? Ellen White wrote extensively about the profanation of the Sabbath among those who profess to keep it. Adventist families who technically don't work on the Sabbath, but who use it for everything except deep communion with God. They begin preparations after sunset on Friday, forcing themselves to work during time that should be holy. They use the Sabbath for superficial socializing, conversations about work, money, material plans, distracting entertainment, and meals so elaborate they require excessive effort. The Sabbath becomes a day off, a day of physical rest, but not a day of intense spiritual renewal, not a day that truly transforms. And she warned, this half-kept Sabbath produces half-committed Christians with half-dead faith. Isaiah chapter 58 verses 13 and 14 is brutally clear. If you turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your own pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight and the holy day of the Lord honorable, and honor it, not going your own ways, or seeking your own pleasure, or speaking your own words, then you shall delight yourself in the Lord. Did you grasp the conditions? Not doing your own will, not seeking your own pleasure, not speaking your own words. This isn't freedom, it's total consecration. It's surrendering the entire 24 hours to God to determine what happens. And if you're brutally honest, that's how you keep the Sabbath, or basically do whatever you want, as long as it's not obviously sinful or secular work. Many Ellen White scholars interpret her writings this way. The Sabbath in Adventist theology is not simply a commandment to obey. It is the weekly time of maximum spiritual renewal, the day when the connection with heaven should be deeper than any other day, when study should be more intense, when prayer should be more fervent, when service to others should be more active. A day that, when it ends, has transformed you, filled you so spiritually that you can face another week with divine power. But when the Sabbath is just rest without intentional spiritual growth, what did you really receive? A day off, no spiritual renewal, and week after week your spiritual tank never gets filled. You slowly empty yourself until one day there is nothing left. And here is the pattern White saw. Families without a family altar during the week also do not have truly holy Sabbaths, because sanctification cannot be activated one day if it is not practiced the other 6. Deep communion on the Sabbath does not work if there is no daily communion the rest of the week. Everything is connected. The first pillar supports the second. The second reinforces it. The first pillar collapses, and when both of those fall, there is a third that also cannot stand, a third pillar that the modern Adventist church hardly mentions, even though Ellen White wrote about it extensively. What is this third pillar? Your body, specifically what goes into it. Ellen White developed a theology of health that was radical for her time and remains controversial today. She taught something that sounds strange to modern ears. There is a direct connection between what you eat and your capacity for spiritual discernment. Without it, you cannot have a clear mind to hear God's voice. If your nervous system is constantly disrupted by substances that artificially stimulate or depress it, then health reform is not a medical issue separate from the spiritual. It is essential preparation for the end times. And she warned that those who did not purify their bodies would lack the mental clarity to discern truth from deception when the final trials came. Wait, does this mean that, according to Ellen White, you can know all the doctrines correctly, but if your diet is destroying your nervous system, you will be unable to apply that knowledge when you need it most? Your brain will physically fail to function properly under extreme pressure. You will collapse not from a lack of knowledge, but from a lack of mental clarity caused by years of improper nutrition. That is possible. In her advice on diet, she wrote about stimulants that produce excitement followed by depression, sugars that generate emotional instability, meats that, according to her, inflame passions, hindering self-control, and strong spices that irritate, producing mental irritability. Her argument was that these foods create a constant nervous imbalance that makes inner peace and mental clarity impossible. Now honestly examine your diet. Coffee every morning just to function. Sugar throughout the day in various forms. Meats in pine nuts, belts, most meals. Processed foods full of artificial chemicals, sodas, fast food. Constant snacking. Your body never rests. Your digestive system is never cleansed. Your nervous system is in a state of permanent excitement or depression, never in natural balance. And then you wonder, why can't you concentrate during worship? Why do you fall asleep when you read the Bible? Why do you feel nothing when you pray? Why are your emotions unstable? Why is there constant conflict in your home? Ellen White would have connected all of this directly to your diet. This may sound extreme. It may seem as if she is saying that diet saves you, which would be heretical. But scholars point out that she did not teach that. She taught that diet prepares you, that an intoxicated body produces a confused mind, and a confused mind is vulnerable to deception. Health reform is not the path to salvation, but it is part of preparing you to resist. When the final crisis comes, it's like cleaning your windows. It doesn't give you light, but it allows you to see the light more clearly. The right diet doesn't give you the Holy Spirit, but it allows you to perceive His voice more clearly. Do you see the difference? Then here's the full picture that Ellen White painted and that almost no one sees. 3 pillars uphold the spiritual life of a family: daily family worship, holy Sabbath observance, and purity of the temple of the body. All 3 are connected, all 3 reinforcing each other. When all 3 are standing, the family is protected. It has discernment, it has power, it has a real connection with God. But when the pillars fall, what remains? Doctrinal knowledge without spiritual power, orthodoxy without life, outward forms without inner reality. And Ellen White warned that when the final shaking comes, these families will fall even if they have professed the truth for decades. Wait, this means that right now there are Adventist families that appear solid but are completely vulnerable. The 3 fallen pillars: without consistent family worship, without truly holy Sabbaths, without purified bodies, profess all the correct doctrines, faithfully attend church, and actively participate, but spiritually they are dead without knowing it. And when the trial that Ellen White described comes, they will collapse instantly. They won't understand what happened. They thought they were prepared. They thought their knowledge would protect them. They didn't know that knowledge without practice is absolutely useless in a real spiritual crisis. The brutal question you must answer right now is this: how many pillars does your family have standing? Be brutally honest. Don't answer based on what you believe or what you profess. Answer based on what you actually do every day. Do they have family worship every morning without exception? Do they observe the Sabbath with complete holiness, intensely dedicating 24 hours to God? Do they keep their bodies pure through food that strengthens rather than weakens? If the honest answer is no, then according to the theology that Ellen White developed, your family is spiritually exposed, not protected, not prepared, not ready for what is coming. And here's what's truly frightening: the time to prepare is running out. Ellen White warned that there would come a point where preparation would no longer be possible. Not because God arbitrarily closes the door, but because character reaches a state of fixity where it can no longer change like hardening cement. At first, it's easily molded, then it's difficult to shape. But once completely hard, no force can alter its form. And she foresaw that many would reach that point without realizing it. They would continue attending church, continue professing the faith, but inwardly they could no longer change, they could no longer prepare. They had already crossed the point of no return. How do you know if you've crossed it? Here's the test. If you feel conviction right now, if something inside you is telling you that you need to change, if you recognize that the pillars are crumbling in your family, that's evidence that the Holy Spirit is still at work. You still have a chance, you can still act. But White warned that every time you feel conviction and ignore it, your conscience hardens a little more. The next time your conviction will be weaker, and eventually you'll reach a point where the Spirit reveals the truth to you and you'll feel absolutely nothing. There's no discomfort, no desire to change. Your conscience is completely seared, and at that moment you've crossed the point of no return without even noticing. Then the decision you make in the next few hours will determine something eternal, not in theory, but in practical reality. You can close this video and continue exactly as you have been. You can agree with everything but do nothing. You can postpone changes until it's more convenient. And with each passing day, your conscience hardens a little more. Your capacity to change diminishes. You approach the point where change will no longer be possible. Or you can decide right now that your family will begin tomorrow to rebuild the pillars, that you will establish family worship regardless of resistance, that you will reform Sabbath observance regardless of what others think, that you will purify your diet no matter how difficult it may be. Which do you choose? Because there is no third option. There is no neutral zone. You either prepare or you collapse. You either lay the foundations or you fall when the shaking comes. Ellen White saw it clearly, and she's showing it to you clearly. The question is, will you act while you still have the power to act? Write this exact thing in the comments. I am restoring the 3 pillars in my home, not as a vague wish, but as a specific commitment that begins tomorrow. Let that comment be a public pledge. Thousands will read it, pray for your success, and hold you accountable. Subscribe now, because tomorrow I will reveal something White wrote about the specific signs that a family has already crossed the point of no return. How do you detect it? And what should you do if you suspect you're close? I will also explain the exact process by which the enemy destroys families step by step. At what point can you still stop him? And at what point is it too late? Your family is in an invisible spiritual war. Now you know what the weapons are. The question is, will you use them before the war is over and you discover you lost without even having fought?